Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And welcome to the penultimate episode of our Last of Us Season 2 reaction miniseries. Again, they are not a sponsor.
Shame.
It's a real shame. But here we are doing it anyway out of love because the second game is my favorite game of all time. They are splitting up. I read another article recently that said into 3 seasons. So
really?
Yeah, this is part 1. They said the next season is going to be longer because I believe the exact quote was the narrative bomb of Joel dying was too hard to get away from. So this season is like that.
Okay.
But they said that we have more room to explore in the next season and potentially the next. But anyway, spoilers. Hopefully, if you clicked on this, because I just gave you the biggest one.
You've already caught up.
You're already caught up. But we're going to spoil the most recent episode and previous episodes of the second season of The Last of Us show, the first season, the game, first game, parts of the second game. But I'm trying to avoid like big game parts. So I have to tell you, I don't even know what they're going to do half the time anymore. So it could, I don't know.
Who knows?
Yes. There's only one more episode left in this season. So during this time, we are not doing our Sex and the City watch react podcast or fiction ones to give Christina some more breathing room, but we will come back to those in June. And yeah, normally Samantha and I watch these together. We didn't get to do it with this one, which is a shame because you would have laughed at how hard I cried.
I should have been there just to take pictures.
It was bad. It was bad news. But this does bring me to a funny story that I have. I finally got to meet up with my mom for Mother's Day. I know I'm so late, but we finally got to meet up. And I told her, I was honest, and I said, one of the reasons I've been so busy is we're doing these Last of Us watch parties, and it's just like a whole day, and so I don't have time on Sundays to do. Anyway, I told her this, and we were at a restaurant, and she like rested her head back on the booth with a groan, and then put her hands in front of her on the table and rested her forehead on her hands and said, "How could they kill him? He's so attractive."
I mean, many people would agree with her and have agreed with her.
I was not expecting this at all.
That's amazing.
This was a shocking take from my mom.
That's amazing.
I did not know she was watching it. She watched the last season and she loved it. Okay. And when we got to the end, she said, "Oh, it's kind of a happy ending. Joel and Ellie get to live happily ever after together." And I stayed very silent.
Betrayal.
I was like, "Well," she said, "how could you not tell me they were going to do this?"
Betrayal. She
But
said.
It was so funny. And then I told her, I said, "Well, you know, Pedro Pascal is coming back," because she hadn't caught up on the most recent episode.
Okay.
And she sagged in relief and was like, "Oh, really?" And then I said, "But really only for that."
Right. She knows he's not coming back for like more than like a couple of flashbacks, especially like as we keep going. I bet they'll bring him in at least once a season.
I think they'll bring him in. If we were sticking to the game, this would be it. We would not see Joel again.
Right.
I bet they'll bring him in for at least one more flashback. But I don't think much more than that. But it was so funny. And she was talking to me all about it and all of her thoughts. It was a wonderful time.
Cute.
But I just love her first reaction was he was
like
so
she was
attractive.
ready to talk to you, but ready to talk about it. And then she had to give herself a moment. And then that was the statement. I love it.
Yeah. And there were people in the restaurant. There were other people like looking
beautiful
at it. It was great.
They were like, what's happening? I feel like people would understand.
They would understand.
They would understand.
They would understand. But she had a moment of intense reaction and then anger. And then we just talked about it.
Rightly so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's where we are with this episode, actually. We are kind of at the eulogy. Mm-hmm. So the way these work is Samantha gives the recap and then I go through my thoughts. So Samantha, would you like to give the recap?
Here we go. So we have an interesting opening, I guess, with two children. Like, it took me a minute to figure out what was going on, by the way. I was like, what? And they were like, the youngest one is obviously brother saying he's going to, use the belt. He's going to hit me, all these things. And the older one's like, no, he won't touch you. I will get hit. So he sends him off to his room, and it turns out it is younger Joel and Tommy. And obviously the father's abusive. The father comes in. He's a sheriff. You're like, what the hell? Or a police officer. And I'm like, oh, bad news. And they had this whole back and forth in which essentially Joel's challenging him. It's like, you're not touching him. I'll take it. He didn't do anything wrong. Tries to lie. The father does something unexpected and goes grabs a drink, brings one for him. Then he sits down and then tells a story about how he got punched in the face by his father, couldn't eat for weeks and all these things. And you're like, what the hell? And then, Joel responds with, and how could you do that to us if you know how this feels? And he's like, I've never hit y'all like that. I've never been this bad, and I've done better than my father. And then he goes on to say, when you have your own, my hope is that you'll do better than me. Cut to, we have birthday scene to Ellie, very cute. Come in, he's talking to Seth at one point, and you see them trading off because he gets Legos, and then he's like, I want this by tomorrow. And they're like, what? And I'm sitting there like, what are we getting? Ammo? And he says, vanilla or chocolate? Vanilla is faster. He's like, fine, vanilla. And then he also gets like a bone marrow piece and is working on this guitar, beautifully done, and gets a painting of a drawing, which is a very famous drawing, into this game, and have this moment. And it turns out it is Ellie's 15th birthday. He gets her a cake that says happy birthday Eli, which is a whole thing, but it gets so good. Ellie eats it with her hands and talks about how good it is. He gives her a present, which is the guitar with her drawing on it, which is a moth. They have a little bit of a moment. It's a very sweet moment. And then we have this, before she had burned her arms. This is where she burned her arms, right? Yeah. And Tommy brings it in. She's on painkillers and says, I just wanted to wear short sleeves. That's a whole damn thing. And then a year later, for the 16th birthday, this is where I got confused, we have a moment. And they're going exploring. And we see this whole cute view about how they need to go exploring more often, all these things. And then he brings her to the area after a fun conversation about birds and bees. And Jesse is mentioned here. And then as they go up, he has found the museum with dinosaurs and astronauts, and they have this amazing scene, very heartfelt moment. You love it. They love each other, having a great time. You have the moment where she hears the takeoff in the astronauts and gets her own helmet, and beautiful. And I'm sure you're already crying by this point, right, Anney?
It wasn't good.
Okay. And moving on, we go on to the 17th birthday, where it becomes a little more awkward, and he hears noises. He's got a cake. He hears noises in her bedroom, busts through, and turns out he's with a girl, and they've been making out. And then also, maybe a tattoo was involved, and in drugs. And he's like, you're doing all of this all at once. Why? And then they have this blowout, and then he goes away, and we see Gail, and he has a conversation about, a couple of things, including about her tattoo, which is a moth, and he asks her what it is, it's about, and they come to realize it's about death when he, the father moment of pretending, I'm trying to figure it out, and he thought it was a butterfly about new life and all these things. But it is a father-daughter exchange, but it is getting more and more awkward as the birthdays come, as she is growing. We jump ahead 2 years to 19 and his birthday gift to her after, by the way, she's moved into the garage at this point. And she's practicing a whole scene about trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
At the
she's
hospital.
She's written questions. Yeah. She wants to ask him about what happened.
But she doesn't quite get there yet. And we jump 2 years later and he takes her training for hunting and all of that stuff. And they have this moment. He kind of he's giving her I would like to spend more time. This would be nice if we could do these together. Yeah. But at that point, we get an emergency call about something happening. And he tries to go and tells her to go back to Jackson. And she's like, hell no, I'm not your daughter. I'm your partner. And he's like, all right, fine. And they go together and they come across one horrid scene of a horse dragging a person, obviously who had died. Had been eaten or gotten bitten, one of those two things, and then come up and we meet Eugene, the infamous Eugene, who is like, I'm okay, but yeah, I got bit. And at this point, he's like, look, and Joel's ready. Let's shoot him immediately. He's like, we're sorry. He's like, no, I need to see Gail, who is his wife. He's like, I need to see Gail. I need to talk to her. I need to tell her something. I have to tell her something. And Joel's like, I can't do that. You're about to turn. He's like, no, really. And then, Ellie, with her empathy, was like, wait, do these tests. Let's see how long you got. Figures out he's got time. She's like, I can go get the horse. You can come my way and we can get him there before he passes away and or before he becomes a zombie or needs to be shot. And he can talk to Gail. And she's like, promise me. He's like, I promise. And all these things. So she goes off to do this. And they have this moment and Eugene and Joel are walking and Joel leads him to the water and Eugene knows what's about to happen. He's like, man, I need to do this. He's like, I'm sorry, I can't let you. I have to protect my family. And then he's like, then what do you want to tell Gail? And he's like, I don't not want to tell Gail. And I need her to tell me that I'm okay. I need her to talk me through this. I need her. It was a very sweet moment. And as we pan away, we come back to Ellie coming back with a horse. And he has shot Eugene. And he lies and says there was no way we could do anything about this. We had to do this right. He was all these things. And then he's like, we'll tell Gail what she needs to hear. And that's how it goes. And then they go back and he tries to tell her all these things about how he loved her. He was brave. He shot himself and Ellie was not having it. And then just says everything that he did that was a lie. And she ends up with him saying, you swore. I've seen that look and I know you swore. And that's kind of how that ends. Gail gives a good slap in the face of Joel, kind of deserved, honestly. And we have we see the moment of what happened and she stops talking to him essentially at this point. They haven't talked about anything else and he knows that he is lost because he knows that she knows he's lying. He's been lying all this time. We have another time jump to that scene where she just faces him after the New Year's Eve incident, all that shows and happens and how he is Uncle Grumpy. All the things went down at that point, and you see him on the porch with his coffee with his owl mug, which is also infamous in this world. And she walks up, stares at him, and it looks like she goes to her garage area, but doesn't, turns around and comes back on the porch. And they have a heart-to-heart. And she asks him all the questions. And she's like, this is your last chance. You have to tell me the truth. And which he does tell her, yes, he did kill them. Yes, they could have had a cure. Yes, he selfishly made this decision. And he tells essentially, but this is the price I will pay for what he has done. And then he also says, I would choose this again. I would choose it all over again to save you. She says selfish and then says the quote, I don't think I can ever forgive you for this, but I would like to try. Cut scene. And we see Ellie coming back to the theater and rain.
Present day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we are.
That's what destroys me. That scene, the porch scene.
Yeah.
I cry the most at that scene. It wrecked me in the show. It wrecks me in the game.
Yeah.
Oh, God. So this episode is called The Price. And if you notice in the credits, it's two figures again, because it's Joel and Ellie again. But this is, as I said, the eulogy of Joel. This is where we're saying, like,
don't get too excited, folks.
Goodbye. Goodbye, my friend. But it is also all about cycles of, it's both cycles of progress, but also cycles of just you're stuck in the same thing. So the flashback that opens it with young Joel and Tommy is not in the game. It's alluded to very vaguely that their childhood was abusive, but it's never made clear. It's never made specific. Tommy has a quote where he says something like, Joel's protection wasn't worth it. And I always assumed that meant what they did to survive during the apocalypse. But it's possible he was talking about further than that. And there's a couple of other offhanded things where you could interpret it in that way. But you kind of see him already having this, you know, kind of understandable, honestly, tendency to lie, to protect someone, to resort to violence, to protect someone, because he had started beating up the kids that were selling drugs to Tommy. But I also think it's interesting that his dad, who is a cop, says immediately, like, do you think I wouldn't find out about this?
Right.
Like, it's a lie that had a lot of room to fall apart.
Right.
Like, it was easy to verify that
Right.
was not what happened.
Right.
But he was willing to do it. And he was willing to take the pain for it.
Mm-hmm.
But also this whole idea of, you know, I hope you do better than me. And you do see instances of Joel. A lot of people have written essays about this that I've read, that you see a lot of instances of him when he's in Jackson where he's really trying to make life instead of death. Like, he's, instead of like doing violent things, he's carving all these like owl statues, and he's making a guitar, and he's brewing alcohol. Like, he's he's making things. So he did have progress in that way. And we'll talk a bit more about some of the other progress he had. But you also see the watch, the infamous watch on his dad's wrist. So that is being passed down. I think it's interesting, again, that Ellie did not take the watch. She took the gun. So it's sort of, what are you picking up from what's being passed down? And we do see, like, a couple instances of characters with their children, like Seth, who we met first as a homophobic character, is talking about his grandkids and how they would love the Legos that Joel found, and how he was a cop, which Joel visually was like, oh,
Yeah.
oh no. But like, you see he cares about his kids, and then you see Tommy with his kid.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have Joel, who has really assumed the role of Ellie's father,
Mm-hmm.
even though she's kind of chafing at it. Because, like, at first it was all about protection, and now he's doing the, like, oh, you got a tattoo?
Right.
A very, very paternal kind of action. But the episode is told mostly through Ellie's birthdays. It's a series of flashbacks told mostly through her birthdays. And it does start with her 15th. And that's when we see, I just kind of wanted to mention, I thought it was funny that Seth is making Ellie's cake when he's homophobic. And there's kind of that whole, you know, I won't make cake for gay people. So it kind of made me laugh in a sad way. But yes. Yeah. But he's the one that makes the cake. And that's when we do get the revelation that she has burned her arm purposefully because she wanted to wear short sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
And she says in there, they're giving us a lot of hints about how reckless she is, or like how she makes impulsive decisions, because she says like, I just saw it and then I just did it. So we're seeing more of that. But then we do have a very sweet scene where she eats the cake with her hands, which I think is supposed to be like she grew up in the apocalypse and so whatever. But then Joel plays the song, the whole song for her, the Pearl Jam song Future Days, which she couldn't play in a previous episode because she's still stuck in this trauma. But he plays that for her, and with the guitar that he made, which, by the way, the bone that you mentioned is for the bone bridge for guitar. So he made this guitar, and he has kind of a cute, stumbly speech about how much work he put into it. And she's just like, oh, yeah, sure. Play something for me. So they have this really nice moment. And then it jumps to the next birthday. And this is the one, this scene, oh, everyone knows. Everyone knows it. Even the museum that this scene is based on was like, I can't believe how amazing. How did you do this? But anyway, Joel takes Ellie to a museum that he found. And there is a big T-Rex statue out front that Ellie climbs to the top of, which, by the way, is a missable thing. I missed it the first time I played it. But you can climb to the top. They did cut out, I think they shot it, but they cut out the scene where they go and look at all the other dinosaurs. But that's where the Indiana Jones hat Easter egg that we mentioned comes from. Because she picks up a hat, makes Joel wear them, and dinosaurs wear them, and all this stuff. But then they get to the space exhibit, which is, as we know, Ellie loves space.
Right.
And it is really sweet because it shows he like knows the things she loves the most. He knows she has this interest in dinosaurs and this interest in space. In the game, he started reading the comics she loved, Savage Starlight, which you can see posters of in her room. But he says to her, would you like to go to space? And then shows her this capsule that's in the museum and says, you can't go to space without a helmet. The helmet she chooses is it's a Gemini helmet, which is one of the helmets that was used during the Apollo explosion that she talked about a couple episodes ago. But so that's not the greatest symbolism, but also Gemini means duality. And that's what a lot of this season is about Ellie versus Abby, all of these things. Hats off to everyone who's written about this. I love it. And then he gives Ellie, he tells her to close her eyes and gives her a cassette tape. And she puts the earbuds in, puts in the tape, and it is the sound of a launch. A space launch, and she closes her eyes and she has this really beautiful moment where she's in her imagination and she's thinking about what it would look like to go to space, which I think is it's both very like one of the last hang-ons of her childhood and being so interested in that, but I think it's also very escapist, because if you lived in that world, I would see you being like, you know what? If I can go to outer space.
Right.
That sounds great. But alas, you must come back down. Also, Samantha gave me that tape for one of my birthdays, and I love it.
Did you listen to it?
Yeah.
Oh, you did? I didn't know if I did or not.
Nice. Yeah. So they have this beautiful moment. And then Joel asks, did I do okay? And she says, are you kidding me? That was like the best thing ever. And she's like kind of teared up and he's kind of teared up, which I think is really sweet because he's obviously really happy that she's happy. And it's interesting to me because in the actors were told not to play the games.
But Bella did, right?
I believe Bella did.
Yeah.
I think young Mazzino has. Like, he had already when he auditioned. So some of them have, but I know Pedro Pascal has not.
Right.
He tried to, and then I think he got too scared. He was too bad at it.
Oh, he was too bad at it, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it's interesting because in his kind of retelling of why Joel was reacting this way, it was that he was so happy he made her happy. And that's like the best thing you can do for someone. But I've always kind of interpreted it as he needed the affirmation, like he needed somebody to tell him, oh, I'm doing okay. Yeah. Yes, I am still doing the right thing here in this story. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. I do think he was happy for her. I think there's space for both. But that sort of like always needing, because he has a bunch of other moments like that in this episode where he's like, we should hang out more. This is so fun. We should, like, he just has a lot of stuff like that. And then also, yeah, just to hammer home, if you haven't heard the song Future Days, look up the lyrics and you'll be, the future days never come.
Yeah, the way you just said that. Amazing.
Yeah. But that's like, that scene is one of the most beautiful sections of the game. It does include another part they cut out where they go to another museum. Oh, I am sad they cut that out now that I think about it. Because they go into the museum, but Joel can't get in. Ellie's small enough to get in. And she's trying to find another way to exit. And this wild boar, keeps like attacking her. And it's really scary because it's dark and you just hear this sound, and there's all these scary messages on the wall, like they let the children starve and all this stuff. And you come out at one point from crawling, and there's just a statue of wolves surrounding a moose. And it's so symbolic and so creepy. And then Ellie finds the firefly emblem, and underneath it said hope was all a lie. And then Joel finds his way in, and it's just real awkward because she's like, should I bring this up? And he's like, please don't bring it up. But they kind of have that moment in the show when she sees the fireflies around the tree, and it's like, something is not right. But yes, that scene is a beautiful scene. But it does happen right after the whole Nora thing, where after Ellie tortures Nora. It's that scene. So some people like really hated that pacing. I liked it because it was like, oh my God, I need a moment. Then we skip to the next birthday, which is full of the teenage stuff that you mentioned. And we get the return of Kat. Kat, Ellie's ex. That was in the first episode, and I was so excited because she's like a mention in the game. She's in Ellie's journal, but you could miss it completely if you don't read her journal. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of fun to see her. But as I said, she is the one that gave Ellie her tattoo. And I love how she was like, it will look better once I fill it in. As if that was why Joel was mad. But yeah, so basically Joel came home early to celebrate Ellie's birthday with chocolate cake this time.
Yeah.
The fancy stuff.
The fancy one.
And there was Kat and Ellie seemingly having an intimate physical moment. And Ellie has gotten this tattoo, is smoking pot. And he's just outraged and says like all the teenage stuff at once then. But it is interesting because of how the show started, with how his dad reacted to Tommy getting the weed and that whole thing and how he reacts. And he does feel like a very like conservative parent here. I mean, I get it. I'm not a parent, but I understand if you come home and all this stuff is happening.
Right.
But they have this kind of fight about it. He says she's experimenting with girls, which, by the way, there was a funny scene in the previous birthday where he was like, is something going on between you and Jesse? Right. And she was like, oh, no. And he was like, oh, I've got a keen eye for this. And she was like, no, you really don't. But she says it wasn't an experiment. And he says, I'll come back when you're more yourself, which is oof. And that's when she tries to move into the garage. And this I knew was going to have a ton of Easter eggs in it. And it did. Because when she's like packing up her stuff, the album cover, the album you can see, is an album that's famous from being in Kill Bill. Which is very famously pretty revenge-oriented story. There's a bunch of stuff like that. Also, again, shout out to the Easter egg videos that somehow make these videos within like 5 hours. But anyway, that is one of them. But he does ask about her tattoo after they have this fight. And she says it's from like a book about dreams she read. He kind of surmises it means growth and stuff. It doesn't really ask her. It's just kind of like, oh, like growth and stuff. And she's like, yeah,
like change and rebirth.
Sure. But the next day, he finds Gail, the town therapist. And she is like, oh no, it means death. Right. And if you think about the symbolism of a moth, to me, it would be like it's death. It's drawn to light that you can never get. A lot of people have written about how maybe it symbolizes sort of an addiction or something, like with her addiction to getting revenge. Some people think it's the like look to the light fireflies kind of whole thing. But if you look at her sketches, because she has a lot of sketches of this moth, which Joel did, I think, a pretty good job when he made it in her guitar on the bridge. It says on those sketches, you have greater purpose. And she puts that tattoo over her bite. And she has been living with this guilt and survivor's guilt of, I got this bite and I always thought I was going to die and then I didn't. And I've been waiting to be the next person to die and I don't. So I think it's very purposeful that she put it over her bite.
Right.
Also, Gail's book that she's reading, Earth Abides, I think it's called. In it is it's about the apocalypse. And in it, the last man who can read dies. And so the idea is no one will learn how to read once he dies. And so I think the implication is once Gail dies, they aren't going to have mental health. They're not going to have a therapist anymore.
I mean, yes, I'm surprised anybody's doing mental health.
I know. That is new to the show, but I do love Gail, so I'm very happy. So this is like, I feel this is sort of my soapbox. One of two. I have two, but they're short, I promise. I feel Joel wants Ellie to be who he wants and not who she actually is. He only wanted the answer from Gail that he wanted. He didn't actually want the answer. He just wanted the reassurance, that affirmation I was talking about.
Right.
And I think that the Last of Us fandom, not all of us, obviously, but a lot of it is kind of like this too. We all liked Ellie when she was under his protection and looked up to him. But now a lot of folks are like, this ungrateful bitch. And I just, sometimes I'm like, I wasn't really a rebellious teenager, but I feel like a lot of people were. And you can't connect with that at all. And he's done his wrongs, which we'll get into in a second.
Again, what he did with Gil, I was like, why? That's really cruel. And to Eugene, to his face.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll get to that more too, because it was really unnecessary for multiple reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, people are often like, oh, Joel saved your life, Ellie. What are you doing? But she was ready to die. However you feel about that, she was ready to die. She thought she was going to die when she got bit. And she did say she was waiting for her turn.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you can see my recent episodes on cool people who do cool stuff, which was a 2-parter about vaccines. But it's frustrating to me about how individualistic people can be about this instead of thinking about the community. And I've been guilty of this too. For a long time, I didn't get the flu vaccine because I was like, oh, well, I don't get the flu. And then somebody was like, yeah, it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's about other people who might get the flu from you. But I mean, Joel could have gotten a vaccine if it worked in this world. And that's honestly about the best they were going to do. And it's gone. I mean, it's gone. So Joel keeps saying like he understands, but he doesn't. He says to Ellie, I understand, but he doesn't. He says to Eugene, I understand, but he doesn't. He said that in the first season too. There are different levels of I can relate to. I've had a loss and I can relate to. But I feel like he's fundamentally actually misunderstanding.
Right.
Or not willing to even try. And I did forget one of the most important parallels in the last episode, which was Joel's choice to save Ellie versus, I called her Eliza, but it's Elise. Elise's choice, who was the woman at the beginning who was like, my son Leon, we sealed him in. That's what he said. Yeah. That's what he asked for. And that's what we did. So she listened to the choice he made and made this very painful decision for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing is like the agency. I think Ellie's so angry because agency is being taken from her at every turn. Choices are being taken from her. It's even like, you know, Joel and Marlene. I think we're going to get more of this in the next season, but there's kind of a bigger thing that happened behind the decision to just go ahead with the vaccine. But Marlene was like, you know what? You're right. Let's wake her up and ask her. And then Joel just shoots her. Shoots Marlene. So I think that Joel loves Ellie. I believe that's true. But I also think that whole thing was kind of about him and not about Ellie. And I think her revenge quest is more about her than it is about Joel. But I have so many thoughts. I have had somebody, at least one listener wrote into me and was like, you can't understand because you don't have a kid. I mean, I guess that's true. But I kind of am like, I can be empathetic to things. I'm not saying that would have been easy, but he killed like 30 people.
Right.
So, but I just bring that up because in the show, they added in a line that Joel doesn't have in the game where he says, you know, he tells Ellie, you'll never understand. Basically implying like, because you don't have a kid. Until you have a kid, you will never understand what I did. But just a reminder, Ellie knew Marlene. Just a reminder.
That was like, in the story, it was even deeper that the mother, she knew her mother. Yeah.
There's
a whole connection.
Just to remind you.
Right.
Yeah. But also like, I like that Dina gave Ellie the choice that Joel took from her too, where she's like, I'll go back if you want. I'll go with you if you want. But she gave that choice to Ellie. But that does bring us to our infamous Abby, because her choice was kind of taken from her, but now she's made her own. And it's spiraled out into this whole thing that we're going to be seeing all of the consequences of. But yes, this does bring us to lies. The lies we tell. And so Ellie has been stewing on this, been thinking about, there's so many holes in Joel's story. I have all these questions. The tension is rising between them. They finally go on patrol because he lets her.
Mm-hmm.
He finally is like, okay, I'll let you go. And when something actually happens, he tells her to turn around and she says, I'm not your kid, Joel. I'm your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is when we get to Eugene's death, because they find Eugene. He's been bitten. He says, I got an hour. Let's go. Let me talk to Gail. And then you can kill me. Like, he knew what was up, right. But he wanted to hear her final words and have his final words. And Ellie does this test and is like, yeah, he's got time. Let's do it. And she looks at Joel and he's like, no, I promise. We'll do it. You go get the horses. I'll walk you down. And the thing that's really gets to me about this scene is technically Joel was the only one at risk of infection because Ellie was fine. So right. I guess we're to assume he didn't want anyone to find out she wasn't at risk of infection, or he's being too overprotective, or he's just like set in his ways and doesn't care, and that's it. Doesn't have room for this empathy. I mean, I was even thinking about it on my last rewatch. I was like, Eugene could have been immune. We don't know for sure.
Right.
I don't think he was, but he could have been.
Well, he said at one point he was cold. The cordyceps make you cold. But there could be the argument, and I will say this, that he knew bringing Eugene back. What if he turns and then attacks Gail? Or Gail does something to let him go because she doesn't want to see him shot, and then he goes into the village. Like, there are other risks, but it does seem rather cold.
Very. Very. And he takes this Eugene to a very scenic place and kills him, shoots him in the back of the head, and then lies to Gail, and he tries to control what Ellie's gonna say,
right?
Because he's like, yeah, I had to do it. There was no choice. And he, completely makes up this whole story for Gail. Like, oh yeah, he just wanted to tell you he loved you and he did it himself. And he keeps saying like it was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Ellie is clearly stewing over there,
right?
But anyway, this does recontextualize the conversation Gail had with Ellie about last moments, because Gail says, the last moments shouldn't define our whole relationship, but they often do. And now knowing she was robbed of that. But so Ellie hears this and has had enough and tells Gail what really happens. And Gail slaps Joel. And then Ellie says, you swore, which was a very purposeful choice to use swore versus promise, because now we're referring to the fireflies. And what Joel said happened with the fireflies. And it is also sad, if you think about it, that when Eugene, right before he dies, he says, I just want to see her face. And Joel's like, oh, if you love someone, you can always see their face.
Yeah, that was mean.
And then guess what happens? The last thing Joel saw was Ellie's face. Yeah. And this is a scene that got cut out of the game, but Ellie has a lot of tense moments with Joel where she'll say, if only they had a cure, right? If only they had a cure. And this is, I think, her survivor's guilt of like, if only Eugene had had a cure, he could have lived. This brings us to the porch scene. Ooh, the infamous porch scene. You do have a moment that's not in the game of the POV from Joel about this party, this New Year's party, where Maria and he have a sweet, but you're like, oh, well, he'll be dead tomorrow conversation. Tommy's like, see you next year. And I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
Oh, no. But the porch conversation, I can't, it destroys me every time. This is the last memory Ellie has of Joel. This is the last memory as an audience we'll probably have of Joel unless they bring it back. So she walks by and then she comes back to the porch to talk to Joel after they've had this open altercation in front of everybody in the town. And she starts it with asking about kind of small talk, but then she starts it with asking for independence. She's like, I never want to hear you tell me about what patrols I can do again. I never want to do all this. And then he asked her about Dina and the kiss that they had. And you do see his growth here because he doesn't seem to think it's an experiment. He's like, oh, she would be lucky to have you. So he did grow in that way. And he did agree to the patrol thing. They were supposed to patrol together the next day. But then she just can't pretend. Ellie can't pretend things are normal anymore. And so she asks him her questions about what happened at Salt Lake City with the Fireflies. And Joel still can't even say it. In the game, he could say it, but he never was able to voice it out loud, to say it out loud as Gail asked him to in the first episode. He just nods. And he admits that, yes, there could have been a cure, which upended a lot of fandom, by the way, because they're like, really? Like, yes. But anyway, because it was kind of we weren't sure if he believed there could have been a cure.
Right.
But in here, it's clear he believed there could have been a cure.
Right.
And killed Marlene, killed all the Fireflies, lied to her about it. And Ellie basically saw the same look in his eyes when he lied about Eugene that he had when he lied about the Fireflies. So that was her final piece of evidence. And she says, you took that from me. I was supposed to die there, and you took that from me. You took that from everyone. Mm-hmm. And he says, I know, and that's the price I'll pay. But he also says the price in his head is that Ellie won't want to be with him, around him anymore. When literally everyone else, Abby included, like all of her crew, the price is not what you're thinking, my friend.
Right.
But he does say, I'll do it all over again. I'd do it all over again. And this is where Ellie calls him selfish. And I do think, like, going back to what I was saying earlier, there's no doubt in my mind that he cares about her and she cares about him at all. But right. I think that he has so much trauma from what happened to Sarah, his daughter, that's why he was like, the price is you won't want to be around me anymore. That's what he's thinking about. He just can't stand to lose her. And he says, when it's your turn, I hope you do better than me, just like his dad said. And this is also interesting because in the context of Ellie's, one of the big scenes from the previous season was when she says, everyone's always left me, everyone except for you. And her fear of being alone and having this kind of intersection of where that rubs against each other and in conflict. But yeah, as you mentioned, there's also the famous owl mug. He has a carving of an owl, and there's been a lot of breakdown of what the symbolism of that might mean, which seems to be mostly people think Joel thinks he's really wise, but he's really more violent than he thinks he is.
Right.
But yes, you can interact with that in the game. You basically walk through his whole house and you can pick up these items that you saw that remind you of him. And the cup is one, the museum brochure is one. Oh, yeah. But that's also why she put the coffee grounds, the coffee beans on Joel's grave, that's also something very telling of when you lose someone, that last thing that you talk to them with or whatever it is kind of resonates with you. But he did love coffee, so I'm sure he was a big fan. That was a good thing to put on his grave.
Well, he does say, I'm embarrassed at what I had to trade for this.
Mm-hmm.
So that does imply.
Yes. Yeah. But once again, I'll say it. You never know the last time you'll see someone, and this episode is very much... And then, that brings us back to the theater. After Ellie has said, I don't know if I can forgive you for this, but I'd like to try. And that's one of the most painful things, is she never got to try.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as someone who had a bad relationship with my dad when he died, it just is hard to let go. So one thing about this scene that's different from the game is that it's 2 scenes combined. So the porch scene is combined with the scene that happens in the middle after Nora, where actually Ellie ran away to Salt Lake City and found the evidence herself. And she found like all these old tape cassettes about what happened. And then he finds her, and then it kind of plays out similarly. And then you get the porch scene at the end of the game. When she returns to the theater in the game, she is covered in blood and traumatized. I guess we'll see. She's not covered in blood, but traumatized, I would say, probably. I mean, that's what we're gonna... One more episode left. We're gonna see, is Ellie doing better than Joel? We don't know. I do think like this whole idea of no one knows what they're doing and justifications is interesting. Because Joel's dad was very much justifying himself, and then Joel was doing that too. Mm-hmm. And it's also interesting because when I did forgive my dad, it was after he died. But when I did, it was in part because I knew more of his past, and I was like, oh, I can see where this came from. And I also just shout out to Ellie, the courage of confronting someone. Because she did know it, but it was nice. Like if you're alone in the world and there's somebody that you like and is going to protect you, in this kind of father-daughter dynamic, then confronting that and possibly losing that is very scary. But anyway, goodbye, Joel. Goodbye. Maybe we'll see you again. My mom would like now. It. Listen, I was crying too, everybody. I'm right there with you. This is how I cope. This is how I cope. I'm very excited. But I am also nervous because they have so far to go and I don't know how they're going to end it. But I did notice the Ferris wheel is in the Ferris wheel is in the next week on. That's like a big point in the game. Well, you'll see, listeners. We'll stay tuned for our take on the finale. But yes, in the meantime, please email us if you would like to reach us. You can email us at hello@stuffonevertoldyou.com. You can find us on Blue Sky at Momsta Podcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff One Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff One Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.